pinch of baking soda. I might do nuts I often do just in water or a little salt water for some flavor. And if you don't want to get fancy, just soaking them for 7 to 12 to 24 hours in water also is a good way to go. And by the way, it's a simple thing to do, and it doesn't require any time. Nature does everything. All you need to do is remember to think ahead. And all you have to do in 30 seconds, you pour the grain in, you pour some water in, you let them sit, and you're ready, and nature does the rest. So it's easy to do, it just takes some forethought. And that's really the key to a lot of this, is just some preparation. So fermented foods, let's talk about these. Why do I keep talking about fermented foods? Well, this good bacteria is so important. A lot of times now, if you go to get an antibiotic, your doctor may give you a probiotic or tell you to eat yogurt. I know when I was a kid, I used to eat yogurt because if I didn't, I would get diarrhea. Or kids, if you're an adult, maybe if you're a woman, you've had the experience of having antibiotics and getting a vaginal yeast infection. That's because what happens is when you kill off all the good bacteria, then the pathogenic, and you take off all of the, if you're trying to kill the bad bacteria, you also kill all the good bacteria, and that's competition for this yeast. And this yeast, these are substances that can burrow into the lining of the small intestine and create a lot of inflammation, and this inflammation can create what we call that leaky gut that I mentioned. And so good bacteria is going to supply the gut with anything that might have been stripped in the past by antibiotics, or in whatever way it started to get imbalanced and you have this dysbiosis of microorganisms, start to put those good bacteria back in the diet. So some of the things that it does, in addition, it helps with peristalsis and bowel movements. It helps to break down bacterial toxins. It helps to break down environmental toxins. It helps to balance the pH of the gut and make it more healthy so that the good bacteria can really colonize. It supports the immune system. It helps to break down oxalates that we talked about and sugars. All sorts of things that we need for this good bacteria. So it's really essential. It's actually absolutely essential to life. We have about 10 times the amount of bacteria in our body than we have cells in our body. So if you think about that, we're all more bacteria than we are humans. So we live in synergy for thousands and probably millions of years with this good bacteria. We can't just go wiping it out and expect to have the same level of health. We actually work synergistically together, and you want to populate up that good bacteria. And fermented foods, if you can do fermented foods, they have live bacteria already ready to go. And when you get a freeze-dried capsule, which is also fine, it's in a dormant state and it has to be activated, wake up, start feeding, colonize. Well, if you're eating good bacteria, the good fermented foods, that good bacteria is already alive and feeding on its food source. It's already ready to go. So some preliminary information is showing that the good fermented foods may even colonize the digestive system possibly better than some of the probiotics. And so I find that this is often used a lot with the yeast diets and with just kids in general. Everybody can benefit. It's important for a healthy gut. So how do we do that? Well, if you want dairy-free sources, there are raw sauerkraut, and we're going to try some raw sauerkraut later. This is something that you can make yourself or you can buy, but this is not regular sauerkraut. This is not pasteurized vinegar fermented sauerkraut. This is true live lactobacillus fermentation, and it's the bacteria in yogurt, but it occurs naturally on the cabbage or on certain root vegetables like carrots. It's just there. And so when you cut it up, and we'll talk about it in detail later, when you do that, all that natural live bacteria that's in there starts to grow when we do the process properly. And so that's one. And if you can't do sauerkraut because you can't get your child to even eat vegetables, there's ways of pureeing it or just using the juice from it, and there's ways to little by little sneak some of these things in. There's also beverages that kill yeast. There are beverages like kefir that have a combination of that good lactobacillus bacteria, as well as certain yeasts that are good yeasts that kill candida overgrowth. So this yeast that I keep talking about is basically, usually the most common one is candida. And so there are drinks like the coconut kefir. If you know of Donna Gates' body ecology diet, she does a lot with young coconut kefir. And this is something that you can make at home yourself. You can buy it, but it's usually easier to make, and it's a little bit hard to find. There's also other fermented sodas that you can make by using this kefiring process. There's kombucha that you can use that also is one of these types of fermented drinks. And all fermented foods are kind of sour, so if you have children that love sour, some of the kids in my practice, they just squeeze lemon on everything. Some kids eat lemon. Some kids love that sour flavor because their taste buds are a little bit dull maybe, and they seem to be really enlivened by that. And if you have children like that, then they're going to love fermented foods. Most fermented beverages are a little bit sort of sweet, sour, kind of and fizzy. And so they're usually really good and kids really like them. You can also make nut milk yogurts and things like that. That requires a few steps, so you may not start right there, but there are other things that you can buy at the store and use. And then, of course, if you did have a child that could handle dairy, you can do yogurt or regular dairy kefir. You can also make some of this if you want. There are additional benefits to making it, but we'll just keep it there for it to be simple. Homemade broths. This is one of those things that if you don't have a lot of time to be making your own nut milk and doing all these things, making your homemade broth is one thing that is well worth the time. Firstly, you, again, simmer everything, so a lot of the work is done kind of by nature. But more importantly is that so many of those processed broths and stocks have MSG. All the bouillon cubes, all that kind of stuff has MSG. And you're not going to get the good gelatin and the good nutrients when you get it from a can, even if it didn't have MSG. So, so I highly recommend if you're going to make something and start with something, this is a really easy one. You can add it to soups. You can cook your grains and things like we talked about earlier. And if you add a little bit of vinegar to it, it increases the calcium and magnesium because it leaches the calcium and magnesium from the bones before you turn it on to simmer it. There's a great recipe in Nourishing Traditions about how to do that. So we want to look at just what is in these good broths. Well, tons of minerals that are really easily accessible. And also gelatin. And gelatin has a couple amino acids that can help heal up the gut, help with digestion. They can help with sleep and helping with some detoxification properties. These particular nutrients or these particular amino acids like glycine and proline can help with the connective tissue and various things. The big thing I think about broths, one of the most important things is they really help aid digestion. So that's probably one of the key things there. They are broken down by an enzyme called DPP4, which is the same enzyme required to break down gluten and casein. So if you're a little deficient, which it seems that many kids on the autism spectrum are, you may want to give an enzyme with DPP4, which if you go to a lot of the websites where they sell autism-specific supplements and you look at those enzymes, they often have this little enzyme in there for that reason. Then if you are highly glutamate sensitive, there is a little natural glutamate in here, so if you knew that about yourself or your family, you might want to go slowly or avoid this, but by far for most people, this is a good way to go. Water and salt are important. We need to get good quality water and we need to keep our kids as hydrated as possible. So we want to, if we can, avoid bottled water because of all the plastic, and it's just not good for the environment with all that gasoline and everything we do to ship them around. So really, if you can get yourself a good quality water filter, that's a great way to go. And then I would use something what I call a nutritive salt, not a stripped white table salt. If you look at your salt at home, many times they contain aluminum. Aluminum is used to keep them from caking together, and so they use a little aluminum and then it gets kind of bitter, so they dust every grain with some sort of dextrose or sugar. So most commercial, really inexpensive salt has these additives that you would not want in your salt. A good, what I call nutritive salt, would be something like a Celtic sea salt or a Himalayan crystal salt, something that has a little bit of pink or a little bit of green color or a little bit, some color to it. That means those minerals are still intact. If it's stripped white, you don't have any minerals, and if it's a commercial one, you're going to have a lot of other additives potentially. So if you can get yourself a good quality salt, again, when we look at studies, we look at table salt. We don't look at good quality salt, and there's a big difference. And we all need salt for our electrical system to work, for everything to function, for our heart and our lungs to work. So we need to get some salt. And for kids that tend to be